What would you do if you woke up from life-threatening surgery to find a mysterious envelope on your hospital bed containing a photo of your husband marrying another woman in your exact wedding dress? And what if that envelope came with a message saying you're not his first wife, but you might be his last victim? Because what I discovered next changed everything I thought I knew about love, marriage, and survival. The fluorescent lights above me flickered like a broken heartbeat as I slowly opened my eyes. Everything felt hazy, distant, like I was swimming up from the bottom of a deep, dark pool. The taste of metal filled my mouth, and my throat felt like I'd been swallowing sand for hours. The beeping of machines surrounded me, a symphony of sounds I didn't understand but somehow knew meant I was alive. My body felt heavy, disconnected, like it belonged to someone else. As my vision cleared, the stark white ceiling tiles came into focus, each one exactly the same as the next. Sterile, cold, empty. That's when it hit me. I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. The recovery room was quiet except for those machines and the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway. No familiar voice calling my name. No warm hand holding mine. No relieved face leaning over me, telling me everything was going to be okay. Just me, a hospital bed, and the crushing realization that the person who promised to love me in sickness and in health was nowhere to be found. Dr. Morales appeared beside my bed like an angel in scrubs. His kind eyes were filled with something I couldn't quite read yet. Concern, definitely. But there was something else there too. Something that looked almost like pity mixed with a determination I didn't understand. He held a white envelope in his hand, sealed tight with careful precision. My name was written across it in handwriting I didn't recognize. Neat, feminine cursive that somehow looked both urgent and gentle at the same time. "Christina," he said softly, his voice cutting through the fog in my brain. "You did great. The surgery went perfectly. You're going to be just fine." I tried to smile, tried to feel relieved, but all I could focus on was that envelope and the empty chair beside my bed. "Where's—" My throat felt like sandpaper as I tried to speak. The words came out as barely a whisper. "Where's Evan? My husband?" Dr. Morales paused. It was just a split second, but I caught it. That moment of hesitation that told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. "Christina, there's something you need to see when you're ready." He gently placed the envelope on the small rolling table beside me, positioning it so I could reach it when I was strong enough. "This was left for you by someone who said it was very important you read it as soon as you woke up." I stared at that envelope, my heart racing faster than it should have been for someone who had just come out of major surgery. Something deep in my gut, some primal instinct that had been whispering warnings for months, was now screaming at full volume. Whatever was inside that envelope was going to change everything. "Who brought it?" I managed to ask. "A woman. She seemed to know a lot about your situation. She also took care of something else." "Doctor." Morales pulled up the chair that should have held my husband and sat down. "Your entire hospital bill has been paid in advance. Every penny. Surgery, recovery medications, everything." The room started to spin a little. "Paid by who?" "She didn't give her name. Just said to make sure you got this envelope and that you understood you weren't alone." I wasn't alone. But I felt more alone in that moment than I'd ever felt in my entire life. And if you believe that when life gets tough, when you're lying in a hospital bed scared and vulnerable, the people who love you should show up, not disappear into thin air, then you're going to want to hear what happened next. Hit that subscribe button right now because this story is about to take a turn that nobody, including me, saw coming. The pain medication was starting to wear off and I could feel the ache from my incision. But that physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional pain that was just beginning to surface. Because sometimes, the people who promise to stand by you forever are the first ones to run when you need them most. And sometimes, the truth about the person you married is hidden so deep that it takes a stranger's kindness to bring it to light. But let me take you back to how we got here. Because this didn't happen overnight. This was a slow burn that took months to ignite, and I was too blind to see the flames until they were already consuming everything I thought I knew about my marriage. It started about 6 months ago on a Tuesday morning that seemed perfectly ordinary. I was getting ready for work standing in front of our bathroom mirror when this dull ache started in my lower abdomen. Not sharp, not dramatic, just this constant nagging sensation that felt like someone was pressing their thumb into my stomach and wouldn't let go. At first, I thought it was just stress. My job had been demanding lately, and Evan and I had been talking about starting a family soon. Maybe my body was just reacting to all the changes and pressure, but the pain didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. I mentioned it to Evan over breakfast that first morning. He was scrolling through his phone, barely paying attention as he shoveled cereal into his mouth. "Honey, I think something might be wrong. I have this weird pain that won't go away." He glanced up for maybe half a second. "It's probably just stress, Chris. You worry too much about everything." Stress. That four-letter word that became his answer for everything that followed. When the pain kept me awake that night, tossing and turning as I tried to find a position that didn't hurt, Evan rolled over and mumbled, "Maybe try some Tylenol and get some sleep. You're probably just overthinking things." Overthinking. Another one of his favorite dismissals. The weeks passed and the pain evolved. Some days it was a dull ache, other days it felt like someone was twisting a knife inside me. I started keeping a journal tracking when it hurt most, what made it better or worse, hoping to find some pattern that would help me explain it to a doctor. 3 months in, when I doubled over in pain during our anniversary dinner at that expensive restaurant Evan had chosen, he actually looked annoyed. Not concerned. Annoyed. "Christina, can you please try to enjoy this? I made reservations weeks ago." I spent our anniversary dinner in the restaurant bathroom, gripping the sink as waves of pain washed over me, while my husband finished his steak and ordered dessert for one. When I came back to the table, pale and shaky, he sighed. "It's just stress, babe. Maybe you should think about seeing a therapist or something." A therapist for stomach pain. That should have been my first red flag. But the worst part? I started believing him. I started questioning my own body, my own experience, my own reality. Maybe I was being dramatic, maybe I was overthinking things, maybe this was just what adult life felt like and I needed to toughen up. The sleepless nights continued. I'd lie awake at 3 a.m., one hand pressed to my abdomen, feeling that constant ache that never quite went away. Evan would sleep peacefully beside me completely, undisturbed by my restless movements or quiet whimpers of discomfort. When I lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks because eating had become painful, Evan actually complimented me. "You look great, honey. All that stress eating is finally catching up to you in reverse." Stress eating. I wasn't stress eating. I was barely eating at all because food felt like swallowing glass. 4 months in, I finally worked up the courage to make a doctor's appointment. I texted Evan the details, hoping he might offer to come with me, or at least acknowledge that this was important to me. Dr. Martinez, Thursday at 2 p.m., finally getting this pain checked out. His response came 2 hours later while I was sitting in the waiting room alone and terrified. "Busy? Can't make it. Work dinner ran late." Work dinner? On a Thursday at 2 p.m. That should have been red flag number 2. Dr. Martinez was kind and thorough. She listened to my symptoms, asked detailed questions, and ordered a series of tests. As I described the pain, its intensity, its persistence, I watched her expression grow more serious. "Christina, I want to run some scans. This could be several things, but we need to rule out some more serious possibilities." Serious possibilities. Those words echoed in my head all the way home. When I walked through our front door that evening, Evan was watching TV, a beer in his hand, completely relaxed. "How did the appointment go?" he asked without looking away from the screen. "She wants to run some tests. She said it could be serious." "I'm sure it's nothing. Doctors always order tests for everything these days. It's probably just IBS or something." IBS? He diagnosed me from the couch without even looking at me. That night, I called my mother-in-law to tell her about the appointment. I thought maybe she'd have some motherly wisdom, some reassurance, some support. Instead, she laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, Christina, you've always been so dramatic about these things. Remember when you thought you had food poisoning last year? It was just a little stomach bug. You young girls always think every little ache and pain is some terrible disease. Dramatic, there was that word again. But this wasn't a stomach bug. This wasn't food poisoning. This wasn't stress or IBS or being young and dramatic. Deep in my bones, in that place where women's intuition lives, I knew something was seriously wrong. The fear was growing inside me like a shadow getting bigger and darker every day. Not just fear about what might be wrong with my body, but fear about what was already wrong with my marriage. Because when you're scared and hurting and the people who are supposed to love you most treat you like you're making it all up, you start to feel more alone than you ever thought possible. That fear, that crushing loneliness, that sense that I was fighting this battle completely by myself. It was about to become my reality in the worst possible way. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening that started like any other. I remember every detail of that night because it was the last normal moment of my old life, the last time I could pretend that everything was okay. I was making dinner, standing at the stove, stirring a pot of pasta sauce when I felt it. This strange flutter in my abdomen, like something had shifted inside me. I paused, wooden spoon in hand, waiting to see if it would happen again. Then, the world exploded. The pain hit me like a freight train, so sudden and so intense that I couldn't even scream. It was like someone had detonated a bomb inside my stomach and every nerve ending in my body was on fire. The wooden spoon clattered to the floor as I doubled over, gasping for air that wouldn't come. I tried to call out for Evan, but no sound came. The pain was so overwhelming that it stole my voice, my breath, my ability to think about anything, except the fact that something was catastrophically wrong. My legs gave out and I hit the kitchen floor so hard I saw stars. The cold tile pressed against my cheek as I curled into a ball, my entire body shaking with pain and terror. I could smell the pasta sauce burning on the stove, but I couldn't move to turn it off. Through the haze of agony, one thought cut through everything else. I was going to die on my kitchen floor, and Evan was upstairs watching TV, completely unaware that his wife was fighting for her life 20 feet below him. Somehow, using every ounce of strength I had left, I managed to reach my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911, but I got through. 911, what's your emergency? I need help, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Something's wrong. I'm in so much pain. I can't. Ma'am, what's your address? We're sending an ambulance right now. I gave them our address through gritted teeth, each word, feeling like it might be my last. The dispatcher kept me on the line, her calm voice an anchor in the storm of pain that was consuming me. Help is on the way, honey. Can you get to the door? I can't move. My husband is upstairs. Evan, I tried to call his name louder, but it came out as barely a whisper. Evan, please, nothing. The TV kept playing. He didn't hear me, or if he did, he didn't think it was important enough to investigate. I must have lost consciousness, because the next thing I knew, paramedics were kneeling beside me on the kitchen floor. Strong hands were checking my pulse, asking me questions I could barely comprehend through the fog of pain and medication. Ma'am, we're going to take good care of you. What's your name? Christina, I managed. Christina Patterson. Christina, we're going to get you to the hospital right now. Is there someone we should call? Family? Your husband? Evan? I whispered, pointing weakly toward the ceiling. Upstairs. One of the paramedics went to get him while the others loaded me onto a stretcher. I heard voices, Evan's confused tone, the paramedic explaining the situation. Then, Evan appeared at my side, looking genuinely shocked for the first time in months. Christina, what happened? Are you okay? For a brief moment, seeing the concern in his eyes, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this crisis would bring us back together. Maybe he'd realize how much he loved me, how scared he was of losing me. I don't know, I said weakly. The pain just hit me so hard. I'll follow you to the hospital, he told the paramedics. But he didn't. I found that out later. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and medical equipment and paramedics talking in code I didn't understand. every bump in the road sent fresh waves of agony through my body. But somehow I held on to that image of Evan's concerned face. He was going to meet me at the hospital. He was going to be there when I needed him most. When we arrived at the emergency room, everything happened at lightning speed. Nurses rushing around machines, beeping doctors, speaking in urgent medical terminology that sounded like a foreign language. But through it all, I kept turning my head toward the entrance, waiting for Evan to burst through those automatic doors. The emergency room doctor, Dr. Peterson, was efficient, but kind. She asked rapid-fire questions while examining me, her hands gentle despite the urgency in her voice. "Christina, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your pain right now?" 15, I gasped. "We're going to get you something for that pain right away." "When did this start?" "Tonight, but I've been having smaller pains for months." Her expression sharpened. "Months? Have you seen a doctor about this?" "Yes, but my husband said it was probably just stress." Dr. Peterson's hands paused for just a moment. "Your husband diagnosed you?" Before I could answer, Dr. Morales appeared. He introduced himself as the surgeon who would be performing my emergency operation. "Christina, we need to operate immediately. You have what appears to be a severe internal issue that cannot wait. The good news is that we caught it in time. The surgery should be successful, but we need to move quickly." My heart started racing, not just from pain, but from fear. "How long will it take?" "Several hours. Is your husband on the way?" That question, that simple, innocent question that shattered my heart into a million pieces. "I'm sure he is," I said, clinging to hope. "He said he'd follow the ambulance." Dr. Morales nodded kindly. "We'll make sure he knows where to find you when you're out of surgery." As they prepped me for the operation, I kept looking toward the emergency room entrance. Any minute now, Evan would come running in out of breath and worried sick about me. He'd hold my hand and tell me everything was going to be okay. He'd be there when I woke up, relief and love written all over his face. That's when my phone buzzed. Even in my pain-addled state, even with IV tubes in my arm and surgical prep happening around me, I grabbed that phone like a lifeline. This had to be Evan, frantically trying to reach me, stuck in traffic, or desperately looking for parking. I opened the message with shaking hands, my heart full of anticipation and hope. Instead, I read 5 words that didn't just break my heart. They obliterated it. "Business dinner. Can't make it." I stared at those words until they blurred through my tears. Business dinner. My wife was just loaded into an ambulance after collapsing on our kitchen floor, but I have a business dinner. Dr. Morales was still standing beside my stretcher. He saw my face, saw the exact moment my world collapsed, and I watched something change in his expression too. The professional concern was still there, but now there was something else. Something that looked like protective anger. "Christina," he said, gently sitting down on the edge of my hospital bed. "I want you to know something, and I want you to remember this when you wake up. You are not alone. We're going to take excellent care of you, and when this surgery's over, things are going to be different. I promise you that." I couldn't speak. I just nodded through my tears. "Sometimes," Dr. Morales continued, "the people who should love us most show us exactly who they are in moments like these. And sometimes that's the most important information we can have." As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I wasn't just scared about the surgery anymore. I was heartbroken, devastated, and utterly alone. The person who had promised to love me in sickness and in health, who had sworn to be my partner through whatever life threw at us, had chosen a business dinner over his wife's life-threatening emergency. But Dr. Morales was right about one thing. When I woke up, everything was different. Just not in any way I could have ever imagined. Which brings us back to that moment I opened my eyes in the recovery room. Dr. Morales standing beside my bed with that mysterious envelope, the rhythmic beeping of machines monitoring my vital signs, and me asking the question I already knew the answer to but desperately hoped I was wrong about. "Where's Evan?" The silence that followed felt like an eternity. I watched Dr. Morales and the nurse Sarah exchange a glance that spoke volumes. It was one of those looks that medical professionals give each other when they have to deliver news that no one wants to hear. Sarah tried to smile, but I could see the pity in her eyes, the careful way she was choosing her words. Honey, no one's come to see you yet. But visiting hours just started this morning, so I'm sure... What time is it? I interrupted. It's about 10 a.m. My heart sank. What day? Friday, sweetie. You've been out for a while. The math hit me like a physical blow. Thursday night, I'd collapsed on my kitchen floor. It was now Friday morning. That meant I'd been unconscious fighting for my life for nearly 18 hours. 18 hours. 18 hours of surgery recovery. Critical monitoring and not one phone call to the hospital. Not one attempt to check if his wife was alive or dead. How long was the surgery? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Dr. Morales answered this time. 6 hours. It was more complicated than we initially thought, but successful. You're going to make a full recovery. 6 hours. My husband couldn't spare 6 hours to sit in a waiting room while surgeons tried to save my life. Did anyone call ask about me? Sarah checked the chart, and I could see her struggling with what to say. I'm sorry, honey. No calls. That's when the reality really started to sink in. This wasn't just absent-mindedness or poor communication. This was complete and total abandonment. As I lay there in that sterile room staring at the ceiling tiles that all looked exactly the same, my mind started racing backward through our relationship. Suddenly, pattern after pattern became crystal clear, like someone had just turned on a bright light in a room I'd been stumbling through in the dark. My father's funeral 2 years ago. I was devastated, barely holding myself together, and Evan had a golf tournament. Not a work obligation, not an emergency, but a recreational golf tournament that he couldn't disappoint the guys by missing. Your dad would understand, he'd said, adjusting his golf shirt in the mirror. He'd want me to live my life, not sit around being sad. I'd buried my father with my mother and my sister by my side while my husband played 18 holes with his buddies. My 30th birthday last year. I'd been dropping hints for weeks about wanting to do something special. 30 felt like a milestone, a moment worth celebrating. The morning of my birthday, I woke up excited, wondering what surprise he might have planned. He forgot. Completely forgot. I didn't say anything all day, waiting to see if he'd remember. At dinner, when I finally mentioned it, he looked genuinely shocked. Oh my God, Christina, I'm so sorry. This week has been crazy at work. He'd scrambled to order flowers that arrived 3 days late, wilted and clearly grabbed from whatever was left at the shop. When I got promoted to senior manager at work, the biggest achievement of my career, something I'd worked toward for 3 years, I'd called him immediately from the office. Evan, I got it. I got the promotion. That's great, babe. Listen, I'm exhausted tonight. Can we celebrate this weekend instead? We never did celebrate. The weekend came and went, and he never mentioned it again. My best friend Sarah's wedding. I'd been so excited to introduce Evan to my college friends, to dance with my husband, to celebrate love and commitment. The morning of the wedding, as I was getting ready, Evan suddenly developed a migraine. You go ahead without me, he said, lying dramatically on the couch. I'll just slow you down anyway. I went to Sarah's wedding, alone, made excuses for why my husband wasn't there, and watched other couples dance while I sat at the singles table. The miscarriage? The one I'd never told anyone about, not even my closest friends. It happened early, just 8 weeks, but to me it felt like losing a future I'd already started to imagine. When I told Evan, still cramping and heartbroken, he'd hugged me briefly and then said, well, maybe it's for the best. We weren't really ready anyway. Maybe it's for the best. Those words still echoed in my mind 2 years later. Lying in that hospital bed, surrounded by get-well cards from coworkers and friends who'd somehow found out about my surgery, I realized that the empty chair beside my bed wasn't unusual. It was typical. That chair had been empty for our entire marriage. Evan had been physically present, but emotionally absent for every moment that actually mattered. The tears started then hot and bitter and full of 3 years of suppressed realization. Not just tears of physical pain, but tears of grief for the marriage I thought I had, for the partner I thought I'd chosen, for the woman I used to be before. I learned to expect so little. I'd been making excuses for him for so long that it had become second nature. When people asked where Evan was, I'd say he was working hard to provide for us. When he missed important events, I'd tell myself that his trust in my independence was actually a compliment. When he dismissed my concerns, I'd convince myself that he was just trying to keep me from worrying. But lying there in that hospital room with tubes in my arms and surgical tape across my abdomen, I finally understood the truth. I hadn't been married to a devoted husband who trusted my strength. I'd been married to a man who simply didn't care enough to show up. The worst part, I'd taught him that this was okay. Every time I'd made an excuse for his absence, every time I'd convinced myself that his lack of concern was actually consideration, I'd been training him to care less and less. And he'd been an excellent student. Sarah, the nurse, came back to check on me, and I could see the concern in her face when she noticed my tears. "Honey, are you in pain? Do you need more medication?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm just processing some things." She pulled up the chair that should have held my husband and sat down. "You know, in 20 years of nursing, I've learned something about the people who show up and the people who don't. The ones who don't show up when you're vulnerable, they're telling you exactly who they are. The question is whether you're ready to listen." Her words hit me like a revelation. Evan had been telling me exactly who he was for 3 years. I just hadn't been ready to listen. But I was listening now. That's when Dr. Morales walked back in that mysterious envelope still in his hands. His expression was serious, almost protective, like he was a guardian angel disguised as a surgeon. "Christina, before we talk about your recovery, I need to ask you something important, and I want you to answer honestly." I nodded, wiping away the tears that wouldn't stop coming. "Do you feel safe at home with your husband?" The question caught me completely off guard. "Safe, I mean physically safe. Yes, of course. Evan would never hurt me." Dr. Morales sat down where Sarah had been sitting. "Sometimes hurt doesn't look like violence, Christina. Sometimes it looks like abandonment when you need support most. Sometimes it looks like dismissing your concerns when you're in pain. Sometimes it looks like a pattern of absence during the moments that define a relationship." I stared at him, realizing that this conversation was about much more than my medical care. "The person who left this envelope said you'd need to hear that," he continued. "They said you'd been making excuses for someone who doesn't deserve them, and that it was time for you to see the truth." My hands were shaking as I looked at that envelope again. Who would know that about me? Someone who's been exactly where you are right now. Someone who understands what it's like to wake up alone after trusting someone to be there. As I reached for the envelope, I realized that this moment was a turning point. Whatever was inside was going to change everything. I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and myself. And for the first time in 18 hours, I wasn't thinking about where Evan was, or making excuses for why he wasn't there. I was ready to find out who I was without him. Dr. Morales sat down in the chair where Evan should have been, his expression shifting from medical professional to something more personal, more protective. He held that envelope like it contained something precious and dangerous at the same time. "Christina, before you read this, I need you to understand something. Yesterday, when you were brought in, we had protocols to follow. We tried to reach your emergency contact, your husband, multiple times." My heart clenched. "What do you mean multiple times?" "We called the number you had on file. It went straight to voicemail. We left 3 messages explaining that you were in critical condition and needed emergency surgery. We also sent a text message with the hospital information." I felt like I was falling through the hospital bed. He never said you called." "The calls were made between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. last night. Our final attempt was at 6 a.m. this morning. So when Evan texted, "business dinner, can't make it," he already knew I was in the hospital. He'd known for hours and he'd chosen not to come anyway. "There's more," Dr. Morales continued gently. "The person who brought this envelope, she also paid your entire hospital bill in advance. Every penny, surgery, recovery, medications, follow-up appointments, everything. I don't understand. Who would do that? Someone who knows exactly what you're going through. Someone who's been where you are right now." Dr. Morales handed me the envelope, and I could feel that it was heavier than I'd initially thought. There was definitely more than just a letter inside. "She said to tell you that you're not the first, Christina, but if you're brave enough, you could be the last." My hands were trembling as I took the envelope. The handwriting on the front was elegant feminine, and somehow familiar even though I was certain I'd never seen it before. What did she look like? Beautiful woman, maybe late 30s, blonde hair. She seemed to know a lot about your medical history, your symptoms, even your husband's work schedule. She knew he wouldn't be here. A chill ran down my spine. How could she possibly know that? Because she's lived it herself. Christina, before you open that envelope, I want you to know that whatever you discover, you have support. This hospital, your medical team, were here for you. And apparently, so is she. I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. With shaking fingers, I carefully tore open the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper and something else wrapped in tissue paper. The weight suggested it was more than just a small object. I unfolded the letter first. The handwriting was the same elegant script from the envelope, but I could see places where the ink had smudged as if the writer had been crying. "Dear Christina," it began. "If you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. Evan has found another woman to marry, and history is repeating itself in the most devastating way possible." I had to stop reading. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. "My name is Olivia Morrison. I was Olivia Patterson for 3 years. I was Evan's wife before you." The room started spinning. Evan had never mentioned being married before. Never. Not once in our entire relationship had he said anything about a previous wife. "Take your time," Dr. Morales said softly. "This is a lot to process." I kept reading each word, hitting me like a physical blow. "I'm writing this letter because I need you to know the truth about the man you married. Everything that's happening to you happened to me first. The stomach pains he dismissed as stress. The doctor's appointments he was too busy to attend. The emergency room visits where you sat alone, scared and confused while he had more important things to do. This was impossible. This was too similar, too exact. How could someone I'd never met know the intimate details of my marriage? Christina, I know you're probably thinking this is some kind of cruel joke or mistake. I know because I would have thought the same thing. But what I'm about to tell you will prove that this is real and that Evan Patterson is not the man either of us thought we married." I could feel my heart racing as I continued reading. 3 years into our marriage, I started having severe neurological symptoms. Headaches that felt like my skull was cracking open, vision problems, balance issues that made me stumble and fall. Evan said it was stress from my job, anxiety about getting older, maybe early menopause. The words were blurring through my tears, but I forced myself to keep reading. "The night I collapsed just like you did, Evan wasn't home. He was at a work conference that he said he couldn't cancel. When the paramedics found me unconscious in our kitchen, they had to break down the door because no one answered when they knocked." I gasped. "Our kitchen!" She'd collapsed in their kitchen just like I had. I woke up 3 days later to discover I'd suffered a massive brain hemorrhage. But Evan wasn't there when I opened my eyes either. The nurses told me he'd visited once, asked about my prognosis and my life insurance, then left. My hands were shaking so violently now that I could barely hold the letter. "Christina, what I'm about to tell you will change everything. 6 months before my collapse, Evan had increased my life insurance policy to $2 million. He told me it was for financial planning for our future family, but during my 3-year recovery, I discovered the truth." I had to set the letter down for a moment. I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Christina, Dr. Morales' voice seemed to come from very far away. Do you need to stop? We can continue this later. No, I whispered. I need to know. I picked up the letter again, steeling myself for whatever came next. Evan had been researching my symptoms online for months before I got sick. He knew what was wrong with me and he let it progress. During my hospitalization, he tried to have me declared legally incompetent so he could make medical decisions on my behalf. He wanted the doctors to stop treatment. The room was spinning now. I felt like I was going to be sick. But I had a friend, Riley Jacobs, who worked in insurance law. She started investigating when she realized how suspicious everything was. What she found will terrify you. I looked up at Dr. Morales. Is this real? Could this actually be real? His expression was grave. Keep reading, Christina, but know that we're going to get through this together. Riley discovered that this wasn't Evan's first attempt. There had been other women, other relationships that ended mysteriously when the women became ill. But I was the first one he actually married, the first one with significant life insurance. Other women, multiple women. This was a pattern that went back years. Christina, I need you to check your insurance policies immediately. I need you to look at your medical symptoms and ask yourself if Evan might have known what was wrong with you long before you collapsed. And I need you to understand that what happened to you wasn't random bad luck. I set the letter down again, my mind reeling. Then I remembered the tissue-wrapped object still in the envelope. With trembling hands, I unwrapped it. What I found inside made the entire world tilt sideways. It was a photograph, a wedding photograph. Evan stood in a black tuxedo wearing that same charming smile I'd fallen in love with, the same one that had convinced me to trust him with my life. But he wasn't standing next to me. He was standing next to a beautiful blonde woman in a flowing white wedding dress. Her dress. My dress. It was the exact same dress I'd worn to our wedding 3 years ago. Same style, same designer, same intricate beadwork along the bodice. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. The woman looked so happy, so radiant, so completely in love, just like I had looked on my wedding day, just like I had felt when I thought I was marrying the love of my life. But this wasn't our wedding. The setting was different, a garden instead of the church we'd used. The flowers were different, white roses instead of the pink ones I'd chosen. Even Evan looked younger, his face less weathered, his smile more genuine. Dr. Morales, I whispered, my voice barely audible. How old do you think this photo is? He examined it carefully, his medical training making him precise about details. Based on the photo quality, the digital resolution, and Evan's appearance, I'd say this was taken 4 or 5 years ago. 4 or 5 years ago. That meant Evan had been married to this woman just 1 or 2 years before he met me. Which means, I said slowly, the horrible truth dawning on me, that when Evan married me, he used his first wife's wedding dress. The implications hit me like a series of explosions in my brain. Not only had Evan hidden his first marriage from me completely, but he'd been so callous, so calculating that he'd kept his first wife's wedding dress and made me wear it to marry him. I wasn't his fresh start. I wasn't his second chance at love. I was his second victim wearing his first victim's clothes. There's more in the letter, Dr. Morales said gently. I picked it up again, though my hands were shaking so badly I could barely read the words. If you're looking at our wedding photo right now, you're probably realizing that the dress you wore to marry Evan was mine. He kept it after I went into the hospital. He kept everything, my jewelry, my clothes, my entire identity, waiting for the right moment to use them again. I felt like I was going to throw up. Christina, you're not Evan's wife. You're his replacement. And if I'm right, if you're reading this letter in a hospital room after a medical emergency, then you're running out of time. The letter fell from my hands onto the hospital bed, but I could see there was more writing on the back. There's one more thing you need to know. And it's the most important thing of all. I'm not dead, Christina. Evan thinks I am, but I'm not. I survived, I recovered, and I've been building a case against him for 3 years. My heart stopped. When you're ready, when you're strong enough, call the number at the bottom of this letter, because it's time to stop Evan Patterson from doing this to anyone else. I flipped the letter over and saw a phone number written in that same careful handwriting. And Christina, that business dinner he went to instead of being with you in the hospital, it was a date with his next victim. Because men like Evan don't stop. They just get better at hiding what they do. I stared at that phone number, realizing that everything I thought I knew about my life had been a carefully constructed lie. But for the first time since I'd woken up in this hospital bed, I wasn't thinking about where Evan was or why he hadn't come. I was thinking about who I was going to become, now that I knew the truth. With shaking hands, I reached back into the envelope. There was another piece of paper folded smaller. As I unfolded it, I realized it was a letter, a long letter, and it was signed Olivia, the woman in the wedding photo. I started reading, and with every word, my blood ran colder. "Dear Christina," it began. "If you're reading this, then what I feared most has happened. Evan has found another woman to marry, and history is repeating itself. My name is Olivia, and I was Evan's wife before you." I had to stop reading for a moment. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. "I'm writing this letter because I need you to know the truth about the man you married. It started the same way it probably started with you. Stomach pains that he dismissed as stress. Doctor's appointments he was too busy to attend. Emergency room visits where I sat alone, scared and confused. My heart started racing. This was impossible. This was exactly what happened to me. 3 years into our marriage, I collapsed at home with severe neurological symptoms. Evan said he couldn't leave work. He said it was probably just anxiety. By the time I got to the hospital, I was in critical condition. I kept reading, my hands trembling. I woke up 3 days later to find out I'd suffered a massive brain hemorrhage. But Evan wasn't there when I woke up either. He was at a work conference that he said he couldn't cancel. The nurses told me no one had even called to check on me. This couldn't be real. It was too similar, too exact. Christina, I spent the next 3 years in a minimally conscious state. 3 years. Evan visited me exactly 4 times. Each time he asked the doctors about my prognosis, about whether I would recover, about what would happen if I didn't. I had to set the letter down. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. Dr. Morales noticed. "Christina, are you okay? Do you need me to—" "No," I whispered. "I need to finish this." I picked up the letter again. "What I discovered during my recovery will shock you. 6 months before my collapse, Evan had increased my life insurance policy to $2 million. He told me it was for financial planning. During my hospitalization, he tried to have me declared legally incompetent. He wanted to make medical decisions on my behalf." My stomach dropped. But here's what he didn't know. I had a friend, Riley, who worked in insurance law. She started investigating. She found out that Evan had been researching my medical symptoms online for months before I got sick. He knew what was wrong with me, and he let it progress. I felt like I was going to throw up. "Christina, I need you to check your insurance policies. Check them now, because if I'm right, if you're reading this letter in a hospital room after a medical emergency with Evan nowhere to be found, then you're not his wife. You're his next victim." The letter fell from my hands onto the hospital bed. I wasn't Evan's second chance at love. I was his second attempt at murder. And suddenly, everything made perfect, horrible sense. I picked up the letter again, my hands still shaking, and kept reading. "Christina, if you're ready to fight back, you need to meet my friend Riley Jacobs. She's an attorney who specializes in insurance fraud and financial crimes. She's been building a case against Evan for 3 years, waiting for the right moment." The next part of the letter was written in different handwriting, smaller and more precise. "Christina, this is Riley. I know this is overwhelming, but time is critical. If you're well enough to leave the hospital, meet me tomorrow at Cafe Lark on 5th Street at 2 p.m. Come alone. Wear something with pockets and bring your phone. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Most importantly, don't let Evan know you've received this letter. Your life may depend on it. My life may depend on it. I checked myself out of the hospital the next morning against Dr. Morales' advice. My incision still hurt. I was weak, but I had to know the truth. Cafe Lark was a small, quiet place with dim lighting and booth seating. Perfect for a conversation you didn't want anyone to overhear. I spotted Riley immediately. She was a sharp-looking woman in her 40s with kind eyes but a no-nonsense expression. "Christina," she asked as I approached her table. I nodded and slid into the booth across from her. She already had a coffee waiting for me. "First things first," Riley said quietly. "How are you feeling? Are you in pain?" "I'm managing, but I need to know what's going on. That letter, those photos, what Olivia wrote about Evan, is it all true?" Riley reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "It's all true. And it's worse than you know." She opened the folder and showed me document after document. Insurance policies, medical records, financial statements, even photos of Evan meeting with various people I didn't recognize. "Christina, Evan isn't just neglectful. He's calculating. Everything he's done, from dismissing your symptoms to missing your surgery, it's all part of a pattern. He's done this before and he was planning to do it again." "But how do you know all this? How did you get these documents?" Riley smiled for the first time since I'd sat down. "Because 3 months ago, Evan came to my law office. He wanted to update his will and make some changes to his power of attorney documents. He was very specific about what he wanted." She pulled out another document. I could see Evan's signature at the bottom. He signed over limited power of attorney to me for certain financial matters, thinking I was just a regular estate planning attorney. What he didn't know is that I've been investigating him for years, and now legally I have the authority to freeze his accounts, access his records, and make certain decisions on his behalf. I stared at her. He gave you power over his finances voluntarily. Men like Evan are arrogant, Christina. They think they're the smartest person in the room. He thought he was being clever, getting his legal affairs in order before something happened to you. Instead, he handed me everything I needed to stop him. Riley leaned forward. "The question is, are you ready to help me finish this? Because what we're about to do will change your life forever. But it might just save it too." 2 days later, I was home resting when my phone buzzed with a bank notification. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. It was a deposit notification. $180,000 had just been transferred into my checking account. I called the bank immediately, thinking it was some kind of mistake. "No mistake, Mrs. Patterson," the customer service representative said. "The transfer came from an insurance settlement account. Everything appears to be in order." I was still staring at my phone in confusion when it rang. Evan's name popped up on the screen. For the first time in weeks, he was calling me. "Christina," his voice was panicked, almost frantic. "Something's wrong with our accounts. I can't access anything. The bank is saying all my accounts are frozen pending some kind of investigation." I took a deep breath. "Really? That's strange." "Strange, Christina. This is serious. Someone's messing with our finances. I need you to call your bank and see if your accounts are affected too." "Actually, Evan, my account is just fine. In fact, it's better than fine." There was silence on the other end. "What do you mean?" That's when I put the phone on speaker. Riley was sitting across from me in my living room. She'd been there when the bank called. "Hello, Evan," Riley said calmly. "This is Riley Jacobs, your attorney. Do you remember me?" Another silence. Then, "Riley, how are you? Why are you with Christina?" "Well, that's an interesting story. You see, when you signed those power of attorney documents in my office 3 months ago, you gave me legal authority to investigate your financial activities. And what I found was very interesting. I don't understand what's happening." Riley's voice remained perfectly calm and professional. "What's happening, Evan, is that we've uncovered your pattern of insurance fraud. We have documentation of your previous marriage to Olivia. your attempts to have her declared incompetent, and your recent increase of Christina's life insurance policy. We also have evidence of your internet searches about her medical symptoms weeks before she collapsed. I could hear Evan breathing heavily on the other end. This is insane. Christina, you can't believe this. I love you. I've always loved you. For 3 years, those words might have meant something to me. For 3 years, I might have made excuses for him, convinced myself that love was enough. But not anymore. Evan, I said quietly, you missed my emergency surgery for a business dinner. You've missed every important moment of my life for 3 years. That's not love. That's not even basic human decency. Christina, please. No, Evan, I'm done. The police are already involved. Your accounts are frozen. And I want you to know that I'm not angry anymore. I'm just sad for you. Sad that you're so empty inside that you thought destroying other people would fill that emptiness. You can't do this to me. For the first time in years, his mask was completely off. No charm, no manipulation, just pure desperation. I'm not doing anything to you, Evan. You did this to yourself. Goodbye. And I hung up. Riley looked at me with something that might have been pride. How do you feel? I thought about it for a moment. Free, I said. For the first time in 3 years, I feel completely free. A week later, Riley arranged for me to meet Olivia in person. I wasn't sure what to expect. How do you meet the woman whose life was almost your blueprint for destruction? Olivia lived in a beautiful cottage about an hour outside the city. When she opened the door, I was struck by how vibrant she looked. Nothing like the broken woman I'd imagined from her letter. Christina, she said, embracing me like we were old friends. I'm so glad you're okay. We sat in her garden with tea surrounded by flowers she'd planted during her recovery. I need you to know, Olivia said, that I don't think of myself as a victim anymore. What Evan did to me to us, it was horrible, but it also led me to discover how strong I really am. She told me about her recovery, about learning to walk again, about rebuilding her entire life from scratch. She'd used her settlement money to start a nonprofit that helps women escape financial abuse. The beautiful thing about people like Evan, she said, is that they're so focused on destroying others, they never see their own destruction coming. We spent the afternoon with Riley signing papers, restraining orders, property transfers, financial documents that would ensure Evan could never hurt either of us again. As it turned out, Evan had been living in a house that was technically still in Olivia's name. He'd forged documents to refinance it multiple times. He's been living in my house for 5 years, Olivia laughed. Using my credit, spending my money, and I didn't even know it. But not anymore. 2 months later, I was standing in my new apartment looking out the window at a view that was completely mine. No shared mortgage, no joint accounts, no one who could disappear when I needed them most. My phone rang. It was Olivia. How's the new place? She asked. Perfect, I said. Quiet. Peaceful. Mine. You know what I realized today? Olivia said. For years, people told us we were too patient, too understanding, too willing to forgive. They made it sound like a weakness. And now I think our patience was our superpower. We waited, we watched, we learned everything we needed to know. And when the time was right, we didn't just survive. We won. She was right. Love had made us patient. It had made us willing to endure, to hope, to believe in someone who didn't deserve our faith. But that same patience had also made us strong. It had taught us to observe, to remember, to recognize patterns. And when the truth finally came to light, we were ready. We didn't win by becoming like Evan, cruel and calculating and destructive. We won by being exactly who we were, thoughtful, careful, and ultimately unbreakable. As I hung up the phone and looked around my new home, I realized something profound. I hadn't just escaped a bad marriage. I discovered who I really was underneath all that patience and understanding. I was someone who deserved better, someone who was worth showing up for, Someone who would never again mistake cruelbs for love or abandonment for independence. And that knowledge that was worth more than any settlement, any revenge, any victory over someone who had tried to destroy me. Because the best revenge isn't becoming like the people who hurt you. The best revenge is healing, growing, and building a life so beautiful that you forget they ever existed. That's exactly what I did. And if you're listening to this story and recognizing pieces of your own life, I want you to know you deserve better too. And you're stronger than you know. If this story reminded you that you're stronger than you think and deserve better than you've been accepting, hit that subscribe button for more stories about finding your power when life gets complicated. And tell me in the comments, what's one moment when you realized you were worth more than someone was giving you? I read every single comment, and your story might just help someone else find their strength too.